The 60s weren't just big epics like The Great Escape. They also gave us Steve McQueen trapped in a low-budget death trap, Michael Caine in one of the meanest war films ever made, and John Lennon of all people stumbling through a battlefield. These are the 60s war films everyone forgot, but they're still incredible today. The Blue Max is one of those war movies that actually gives you the German side for once. Set in World War I, George Peppard plays Bruno, an ordinary guy who joins the German Air Service in 1918, determined to earn the Blue Max medal. That was Germany's highest honor, but you had to bring in 20 confirmed kills to get it, so it was all about racking up numbers and proving yourself against the aristocrats running the show. Fox spent a fortune on this thing. You get real biplanes, some vintage, some painstaking replicas, and they didn't just stick them on a soundstage. Actual stunt pilots flew those things for real. Douglas Slocum shot it in CinemaScope, and the flying sequences are just brilliant. Peter Jackson actually credits this film as one of his inspirations for aerial combat, and he even restored one of the Fokkers used in the shoot for his personal collection. At the time, critics loved the look and the air battles, but called out the melodrama and long runtime. Over the years, the reputation faded, probably because it's got a German protagonist and isn't as straightforward as Patton or The Longest Day. But honestly, it's just as impressive, especially when you look at those dogfight scenes. This one is probably one of the grimmest World War I films ever made. Most of it takes place in a trench in 1917 during the court-martial of Private Arthur Hamp. He's charged with desertion after simply walking away from the front. Dirk Bogarde is the officer forced to defend him, and as the trial drags on in this claustrophobic dugout, you start to see the toll of war on both men. The director, Joseph Losey, was an American who moved to Britain after getting blacklisted, and you feel that outsider edge here. The whole thing's adapted from a play based on real-life cases, so it's not about big battles. It's about the brutal way the system chews up broken soldiers. When it dropped in 1964, critics respected it. Tom Courtenay even won Best Actor at Venice, but people just didn't show up. The movie's been restored, and now it's seen as one of the most honest anti-war films of the era. The Victors is a World War II film, but doesn't play by any of the usual rules. Written and directed by Carl Foreman, it doesn't give you one big story. Instead, it's a series of vignettes tracking a group of American GIs from Italy to Berlin. The focus isn't on heroics, but on what war actually does to people. You get everything from soldiers' friendships and romances, to black market hustling, to just outright bleakness. Shot entirely in black and white with real newsreel footage mixed in, it's got a documentary edge. Foreman was blacklisted in Hollywood, co-produced Bridge on the River Kwai, and this was his personal anti-war project. He shifted the original British characters to Americans, trying to appeal to a wider crowd but kept the darkness. There's even a scene where bored GIs use a stray puppy for target practice. It's rough, and that tone didn't help it commercially. On top of that, the film opened days before JFK was shot, and nobody wanted a grim war film right then. If you want stripped down and brutal, Hell is for Heroes delivers. Steve McQueen headlines, Don Siegel directs, and the whole thing shot in stark black and white. Set on the Siegfried Line in 1944, a small group of GIs get left behind to cover a retreat, way outnumbered, so they have to fake that they're a much larger force to bluff the Germans. It's a small film, even for the time. Paramount actually cut the budget during production, so they had to use the same patch of land for every scene. There are stories about the cast getting mad over props that barely worked, but Siegel just leaned into it and made the grittiness part of the film's style. McQueen's character is all edge. He's the anti-hero years before that was the trend. Modern reviewers really respect how much this film avoids the big heroics and focuses on the regular guys stuck at the bottom, just trying to stay alive and hold the line. This is probably the wildest movie on the list, set during the Congo crisis of the 1960s, which wasn't exactly a popular subject in Hollywood at the time. Rod Taylor is Captain Curry, a mercenary leading a train behind enemy lines. Their task is to pull out European civilians and a fortune in diamonds. Jim Brown plays Ruffo, his second in command, and the whole movie is just this sweaty, violent ride through the jungle, fighting rebels and dealing with an unhinged ex-Nazi in their group. Jack Cardiff here pushed the violence way past what was typical in the 60s. You get on-screen torture, massacres, and mercenaries who are nearly as ruthless as the bad guys. Critics in 1968 were shocked. The film was considered excessive even by the standards of the time. It did okay at the box office, but it's had a long afterlife. Martin Scorsese has called it a guilty pleasure, partly because of how extreme it is. He even said, "This movie was the most violent I'd seen up to that time. There's a chainsaw fight with an ex-Nazi, a doomed train of refugees, and basically, if there's a solution to a problem, it's violence." This is a World War II Pacific movie about a fictional marine assault on a Japanese island. The opening is just relentless. Marines piling out of those Amtraks straight into hell, bullets everywhere, explosions ripping people apart. The violence here wasn't just for effect. It was something new and way ahead of its time. You get soldiers' arms blown off, people stumbling around in shock. It's the kind of realism everyone later praised in Saving Private Ryan, but this film was doing it decades earlier. What really sets Beach Red apart is how it gets inside the heads of both sides. The film's not afraid to pause the carnage for voiceovers, memories, flashbacks, letting you see what's going on in the minds of these soldiers. You can tell every character apart. They're not just cannon fodder, you know who's who, and that makes the battle scenes even rougher. This movie sparked a genuine scandal. The Catholic Legion of Decency came down hard, the Marine Corps actually pulled out their support, and some theaters slapped on age restrictions or just cut it up. It's hard to believe now, but in the late 60s, showing this much gore and cynicism in a war film was basically unheard of. The arm blown off scene in particular set off a firestorm. 30 years later, Spielberg does almost the exact same thing and nobody bats an eye. Lost Command is about as rare as it gets, a big English-language movie tackling the French colonial wars in Indochina and Algeria. Mark Robson directs, and Anthony Quinn stars as a hard-nosed French paratrooper. The film starts right in the chaos of Indochina, 1954. Quinn and his men barely survive, get sent back to France, and from there it's straight into Algeria for round two. This isn't just a standard war film. The narrative jumps between two wars, showing Quinn's character learning from Indochina and getting even more ruthless in Algeria. Counterinsurgency, torture, whatever it takes. Alain Delon is the junior officer who tries to keep his humanity and fails, and George Segal plays a former comrade who's now a National Liberation Front guerrilla leader. At the time, Lost Command was seen as a solid action piece, but it never made a huge impact. The Battle of Algiers just overshadowed it with its neo-realist style. Critics found Lost Command a bit old-fashioned by comparison, but it's still a rare look at two huge, messy wars that Hollywood basically ignored. Samuel Fuller's Merrill's Marauders is one of those jungle warfare films that actually feels exhausting to watch, in a good way. It's based on the real composite unit in World War II, 1,000 volunteers led by Brigadier General Frank Merrill slogging through the Burmese jungle in 1944. These were the guys who basically became the blueprint for the Army Rangers later on. The film compresses a lot. The Marauders' endless march behind enemy lines, fighting hunger, disease, and non-stop Japanese attacks. Fuller was a war vet himself, and you can feel it. His focus is on the grind, the physical toll, the mental collapse. You get guys dropping from exhaustion even as they win. Claude Akins, Ty Hardin, and the rest are playing composite characters, but what matters is how spent everyone looks. They eat leeches for protein, blast through jungle with bazookas, and keep moving because nobody tells them to stop. Now for something completely different. Richard Lester's How I Won the War, which is just about the strangest World War II movie of the decade. This is the one where John Lennon shows up as a British private, but don't be fooled by the marketing. Lennon's role is tiny, and his acting's pretty much limited to some cynical one-liners. The story's just a framework. Michael Crawford is Lieutenant Goodbody, hopelessly optimistic, leading a useless platoon on a nonsense mission in North Africa to build a cricket pitch. The whole thing is a send-up of war movies, the upper-class British officer class, and war itself. They went absolutely wild with the style. Jump cuts, psychedelic colors, people breaking the fourth wall, characters dying in slapstick and then reappearing. It's absurd, and the comedy is way darker than the ads let on. The film's main joke is that Goodbody keeps narrating his platoon's heroics like a propaganda reel, even as everyone around him dies for no reason at all. The whole movie is one big anti-war statement disguised as farce, and even now it's kind of a shock how bleak and surreal it gets. Play Dirty is as mean as they come, a final directorial outing for André de Toth, with Michael Caine starring as a reluctant British officer in North Africa. The setup is simple. A group of British commandos disguise themselves as Italians and head behind enemy lines to blow up a German oil depot. These aren't noble soldiers. They have no redeeming features at all. At one point, they mow down a group of Arabs just because they get noticed. No hesitation, no moral crisis. They just do it. That's the movie's whole vibe. It's pragmatic, ruthless, and totally unsentimental. There are obvious comparisons to The Dirty Dozen, but Play Dirty is its own thing. Lower key, smaller in scope, and way more nihilistic. De Toth keeps the tension high, and the movie never does what you expect. Martin Scorsese put it best. Play Dirty isn't a sadistic film, but it's mean. The characters have no redeeming social value. They don't think, they just act. The nihilism, the pragmatism, it's frightening.